Thank you. Okay, next on our agenda is rules impacted by budget reductions. Deputy Superintendent Angie Stallings.
Yes, thank you. Sorry, I was trying to turn on my video there and it kept moving for some reason. Good afternoon, board members. Angie Stallings, Deputy Superintendent of Policy. What we're asking for today as staff is some authority from you for us to go in and amend a number of rules that were impacted by the budget changes in HB 5012. From this last special session and other legislation that made adjustments to budgets related to 2020 general session bills, as well as existing programs that may have been cut significantly or completely. In the background on Civic Clerk, you'll see we listed a couple of examples, including 2020 SB 99, HB 67, and SB 93 as policies, bills, programs that were impacted by those budget adjustments. In the case of these three, the funding for those three programs was completely cut. So what we'd like to do, similar to the legislature, they've kept those programs on the books, meaning the statute will stay in place. All of those sections of code did have subject to legislative appropriations in them. In practice, we haven't added that language to our rules because in general, we only enact rules or create rules once not only bills are passed, but funding is attached to them. But in this case, we do have a number of rules that have already been enacted and are in place that require certain things of LEAs, but there's no funding attached. So what we would like today is for you to give us the authority to go in and include subject to legislative appropriations where appropriate, and those words only, those amendments only, to certain rules, and then just refile them with the Office of Administrative Rules without bringing each of those rules to you for your consideration. So it would be similar to what we do when we identify non-substantive changes. We just take care of those, like if we find a cross-reference change that is wrong. In this case, we would go through all of our rules, find out which of those should have that language included, subject to legislative appropriations, and then simply file that change with the Office of Administrative Rules. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Yeah. Board Member Marsh. Board Member Lear.
So is this, Angie, sort of connected? Are these the kinds of programs that the board could look at its discretionary funds and perhaps for a partial program or something along those lines? Would that be accurate?
Yes, that's a good point. And I have thought about whether or not we should say subject to appropriations or subject to legislative or board appropriations, because you're correct. There is a possibility, it hasn't happened in the past, but if we have some one-time funding, there is a possibility that the board could authorize some funding maybe for the 2021 school year to cover that program. And so if that were the case, we could change it to subject to appropriations. And that way, if the board funds it, then the rule takes effect. If the board or the legislature does not fund it, then it wouldn't take effect or we wouldn't implement it. But it's been, as far as I know, we have not had experiences where the boards had the money to do that in the past. But yes, we could say subject to appropriations. And then that way, if the board does find money to pay for that, the rule would be effective.
Or if I can follow.
Appropriations or board funding, maybe legislative appropriation or board funding.
That's right, or even just funding, but I'll leave the wording to you. I just would like to leave that opportunity open because it's to me that part of a program's better than nothing at all, rather than hanging on to our money like a rainy day fund, which I'm not a fan of. Thanks.
Good point. Thank you.
Okay. I see no other questions. Board Member Earl.
So will you just notify us which ones those are? I know you've listed several, but you're indicating that there could be more. Is that accurate?
Correct. That is accurate. What I could do, Board Member Earl, is I could, once we create a list of all of those, just have an information item on the consent calendar if you'd like, reporting which of the rules we amended based on this authority.
Yeah, that would be great. I don't think we need to go through all of them and vote on them, but I do think it just being aware of what they are would be important. So
I'd be
thank you.
happy to do that.
Okay, I'm seeking a motion to authorize staff to amend board rules for programs impacted by recent legislative budget cuts by adding the phrase "subject to appropriations" throughout the impacted rules, and authorize staff to then file the updated rules with the Office of Administrative Rules.
So moved.
I'll second.
Okay, the motion before us is that the board authorize staff to amend board rules for programs impacted by recent legislative budget cuts by adding the phrase "subject to appropriations" throughout the impacted rules, and authorize staff to then file the updated rules with the Office of Administrative Rules. Is there any discussion to that motion? I see none. Please vote. Okay, that motion passes unanimously. Okay, thank you, Angie.
Thank you.
Okay, does that complete that agenda item?
It does. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.